Welcome to this learning session on Predictive MRP in SAP Cloud ERP. pMRP Basics Part 1. In this session, we will walk you through a hands-on system demonstration. You will learn how to create the reference data used in the pMRP simulation. And we will take a closer look at the key options and parameters involved in the creation process. Let's get started. The first step in the pMRP process is to define a scenario. A scenario consists of reference data and the simulation itself. To create this, we use the app Schedule pMRP Simulation Creation. This app triggers a background job that generates both the reference data and the initial simulation. We start by selecting Create, where we can choose from 3 different job templates, based on components, based on top-level materials, and based on work centers. The key difference between these templates lies in the selection criteria and parameters used to identify the relevant materials. For this demonstration, we will use the top-level materials template. Next, we define a job name, for example, pMRP01. We then proceed to the next step, where we decide whether this should be a single run or a recurring job, such as weekly execution. For now, we'll keep it as a single run and start it immediately. Step 3 is about defining parameters. This job will create both the reference data and the simulation. The reference data can also be reused for additional simulations later on. Once the reference data is created, we can copy the simulation and use the same data for a second run. On this screen, we define a scenario according to our needs. We can set the bucket type. By default, it's monthly, but we can switch to weekly if needed. In this case, we keep it monthly. We also define a start and end date. Why this is important? Between these dates, the system collects existing sales orders or planned independent requirements to serve as a basis for the simulation. In our example, we start in February 2026 and go through February 2027, covering 1 year. In the limitation and object selection section, we can apply filters, for example by material status or BOM usage. For this demo, we will use plant 1010 and select a single finished good, since we are working with a top-level material. Additional filters are available, such as MRP controller, MRP type, low-level code. There are many options to refine the selection. One particularly useful option is the BOM selection ID. This allows us to specify that a non-standard production BOM should be used for the simulation. We can define a specific BOM usage to be applied during the pMRP simulation. We can also choose whether to include demands from stock transfers in other plants with specific work centers. In the document data section, we have several options. Include or exclude current stock as opening stock in the simulation. Include or ignore inactive planned independent requirements. Ignore active planned independent requirements. If no option is selected, all active planned independent requirements already in the system will be used for the reference data. We can also choose to ignore sales demands. Once everything is set, we proceed to check and then to schedule the job. As you can see, the job is now running. Its status is in process. Once the status updates to finished, a log becomes available. This log shows the number of products selected from the top-level material, the number of internal and external sources, the work centers or resources included in the reference data, and therefore in the simulation. We can now proceed to review the simulation in the next step. In this pMRP Basics session, we learned how to create pMRP scenarios with reference data and a simulation based on this reference data. This was part 1 of the hands-on demonstration. In part 2, we will dive deeper into the simulation process, how to manage simulations, navigate within them, and analyze the results. Thank you for joining this session. I hope you found it valuable and continue your learning journey.